Hello, Megan Hertzler, Xcel Energy. A question that's going to take this up a little high level and just ask for some thoughts, maybe some guidance. When we look as a utility that operates in 8 states, when we look at guidelines that we may see being developed in a particular state or even in a couple of states, obviously we have to comply with each state, and if you have one state that is perhaps more strict than any of the others, then you will build your compliance plan to meet that state. Perhaps it's California, or maybe it'll be Colorado. My question is, what if you are in the unfortunate sort of circumstances where you have states with guidelines or requirements that conflict? And in that case, as you're trying to build a compliance plan or even trying to put in programs or infrastructure in order to be compliant, what are your suggestions about how we can work with our state commissions to maybe try and avoid conflicts? Because this seems like, this is on everyone's radar, it's very fluid, it's very liquid. From my perspective, wanting to make sure that I can build a program that'll work in all 8 states, I'd be curious what your thoughts are, should we ever get to that point where there is a conflict that appears to be building?
Chris and I have kind of been asking the feds to get involved.
The easy answer is to adopt whatever California adopts.
Yeah.
I've heard that before.
Of course, that's easy.
This is all part of the NARUC FERC Smart Response Collaborative. The states and the federal government are supposed to work together so that we don't have problems of a patchwork of standards, a patchwork of rules. The longer the process takes, the more likely it is for some states to not want to wait. Mm-hmm. Those states that decide not to wait have a very fine line to walk to ensure they don't create a bigger problem. In our smart grid deployment plan, our smart grid deployment plan is designed to not put stakes in the ground too early. It's designed to be a little bit more flexible on the area of cybersecurity so that and privacy for that matter. Privacy is the other important part of the deployment plan. So that we don't either get too far ahead or take the wrong path. It's to allow some flexibility and use of best practices, things going on at the national level to help inform the policies going forward. To the specific question, just having to work through NARUC and I think one of the big things is to have not necessarily commissioners talk to each other, but to have staff talk to each other. Yeah. And Al and I are sitting up here because we're staff and we talk to each other.
And we even have a listserv in which we discuss various items with other states.
Shh, you're not supposed to talk about that. Oh, sorry.
We knew that already. But I think that, just looking at, is there any way to facilitate that? Because at this point, I'm not foreseeing an immediate conflict, but again, this is so fluid, so liquid, and there are so many different groups out there that are looking at this issue. I think it's inevitable that you may have one come up. So I appreciate your thoughts.
The reason we got a guy from California here and a guy from Texas here is that they're big states with active programs. There are other states for whom just the thought of regulating cybersecurity are just beyond the pale. And by the way, those are really important states to my organization. And one of the questions is, if you guys are struggling in California and Texas, and I won't name a particular state because I know that would get back to headquarters, but choose a random state, along bordering the Mississippi River. And just, anyway.
None of which I serve, I understand.
Thank you, yes. Yeah. But what do we do about them? I mean, how are they going to handle this problem?
I'm trying to think of a metaphor, a historical one, the automotive industry, but I wasn't around 100 years ago.
I mean, there was, Commissioner Cintalello from the Ohio Commission, part of the Smart Response Plan was to get the quote-unquote leading states, Ohio, California, Texas, to start moving along to create sort of, I'll call it a market-based approach to creating some of these standards, so that if you have the handful of the big states, then that would develop and lead the way for other states to model upon those states, so that you don't end up with a state creating rules that are different from everyone else. Whether or not that ends up working is still to be determined because we're all still waiting. So that's kind of still to be determined.
That's, sounds good. So you guys are leading, you'll be all wrapped up pretty soon.
Probably the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, man.
Howard.
Yeah, Chris is checking his watch. We're in good shape. There was a recent GAO report, a couple of them, that state that, among other issues, regulators don't have enough metrics or metrics at all to determine the effectiveness of security measures being deployed by utilities. Can you comment on that? What's out there in the way of metrics?
What are you looking at me for?
I want you to go
Chris
first,
is
because I'm going to take
up.
up all the
no.
time.
Oh, no. I'm gonna
Yeah,
just-
let the cybersecurity guy go first. Come on.
No, Chris has to go first because I'm just going to countervene whatever. he
Okay,
says.
so so we had 8 requirements in our deployment plan. One of them is the creation of metrics to measure how well the utilities' smart grid investments are going. One of the topics that we plan to include were cybersecurity metrics. For a number of reasons, the creation of cybersecurity metrics did not go very well in the first attempt. The utilities were resistant to providing any amount of cybersecurity information to the commission that would be made public.
Yes.
So one of the things that we are developing is what we're calling a technical working group to develop cybersecurity metrics. The goal of that would be to create at least some initial high-level metrics to measure how the utilities are doing currently, as well as to measure how the success is going in the future. I lost my train of thought. This would be open to anybody who would like to participate. There would likely have to be some sort of confidentiality agreement, Robert Former's favorite word, NDAs, and that would help move along the discussion of allowing California to create metrics now that Andy Bachman is back in the room, and as well as inform commission staff about the practices and the policies and protocols that the utilities are currently doing and whether or not the commission needs to include any additional policies or protocols. I don't know how long this will take, but it's going to be an ongoing process. The deployment plans are a 10-year horizon, so at least over the next 10 years, we plan to continually review, revise, and update the metrics going forward.
For Texas, it's too premature for us to start thinking about metrics. And my fear is that when you start talking about metrics, you're starting to talk about leaning towards check boxes. And I just, just like to avoid that.
2 comments. My background is actually in utility operations, energy engineering, and we had a very specific metric for measuring how well our power plant was working. That was the heat rate, how many BTUs of coal did we burn per kilowatt hour. And we plotted the number, it was like pretty good, we're doing good here. So I'm envisioning Securometer, which is this big thing that sits on the wall and tells us, that we're 3.8 on our Securometer right now. Ain't gonna happen, man.
Wouldn't it be nice if it could?
Wouldn't it? Yeah, it'd be really good, okay? But it's not that kind of a thing. So what we mean by metrics in security is very different. And at the worst case, it becomes check boxes, okay? And you can always buy a cheap car that has every single feature you can possibly imagine, and every one of those features is implemented in the cheapest, most ineffective way possible. But it looks good on a checkbox. Then you could buy somebody who does it right. In my opinion, the metrics properly derive from the plan, because achievement of metrics tells you whether you're executing your plan. And I think, Chris, and you guys should put pressure, you should make suggestions, you should analyze the problem, you should do all of that, because we need guidance in this area. But I believe that people, when they develop cybersecurity plans, should set specific metrics and timetables against those metrics and be measured whether they're improving them. Let the person closest to the problem define success and then enter into a dialogue with them to refine that.
And I completely agree, and that's what we're hoping to be part of the process, and that's what we were hoping to have done originally, but for the reluctance of the utilities to want to engage in the discussion altogether.
Right, so it sounds like a cultural problem has to be solved before a cybersecurity problem is solved. Is that fair to say?
I would tend to agree with that, and you handed me a nice segue to my next question. In what ways does the does the culture of the utility industry and perhaps the culture of PUCs need to change to adapt to the question of security needs?
I think I alluded to that earlier.
Well, consider it an opportunity to expand upon the concept.
I guess my favorite phrase is less check boxes and more security. You know, change the culture. We got to start thinking about security and not compliance. Change the dialogue. I mean, our hackers don't have check boxes. They don't, you know, maybe their check boxes is, okay.
Well, the good ones don't, anyway.
Knock out the electricity, cause chaos, disrupt economy, gloat about it on blog, you know, that's their check boxes. So again, turn the conversation in the commission, at the utilities, at your ISOs, away from compliance. Stop thinking about this $1 million a day penalty from NERC. Start thinking about securing your operations, your facilities. You know, get your IT guys to breed with the operational people and come up with this.
I think you might have a few EEO problems with that, but
you know, change the culture of everything so the IT people are aware of the operational issues and the people that move electrons understand how to secure that stuff.
Yeah, I think this goes back to one of your first questions, is how do we trust the utilities? I think that's the fundamental question, is how much do we as the regulator trust our utilities to tell us what is accurate, or that they aren't giving us the entire truth? California, as I'm sure many of you are aware, we regulate the 3 main IOUs, and at various times over the last 5 years, at least 2 of them have settled some issues where they haven't been fully truthful with the commission on a variety of topics. And so that sort of untruthfulness historically breeds the culture that we need to be skeptical of what the utilities are telling us. That's probably something we should be doing anyway, but we are even more skeptical that the utilities are not only not telling us the truth, but they're hiding something. And that just creates more work for us to try to figure out what they are hiding.
so there's a cultural process that has to happen on both sides. The utility has to be willing to be more transparent, and the PUC has to be willing to accept that the utility is at least attempting to be more transparent. Okay.
Can I make a comment on cultural change? In
Go
our
right ahead.
community, which is a little bit different. Last year I gave a class at the CEO Summit for all electric co-ops, and there were 2 concurrent sessions, mine on cybersecurity and the other was on the use of Twitter. They got 6 times as many people in the Twitter than they got in mine, which was really disappointing. And I did a hack in real time, which was kind of cool. And I went around and asked everybody, like, why didn't you show up? And the answer was, they're scared. The CEOs, the C-level, the top level, don't know. They're afraid of the problem, and they would like to step back from the problem. Like, it can't be that bad, because it involves words they don't know. And honestly, step 1 in our cybersecurity planning document is appoint a C-level executive. Step 2, send C-level executive to Cybersecurity 101 class being taught by NRECA. Now, this guy will never have anything really to do except establishing accountability, but I think there's a fear factor. This is something new to the operation that they haven't had to address in the past.
Can I say something about that, Craig?
Sir.
There's, I don't know if anybody's seen it, there's this really great little, I think it's like 6 or 7 page Gartner report that came out maybe a week or 2 ago. I don't think I posted it anywhere yet. I'm not sure it's postable. But it's called something, tell me if you know the name of it. It's called something like Why They Don't Get It, or Failure to Communicate. And it's basically pointing out something that everybody in here knows, that if there's not somebody at the C-level or darn close to it who can speak the same language as the senior leadership and decision makers, then security is this freakish thing that operates over on the side. And it's not related to the business. It's, as we were saying before, it's not elemental or core to the business. If there's a way to mandate or incent utilities to appoint somebody at that level. You can't do it like, comparison is with FISMA, right, where you have to have a CIO of a federal agency. We can't do that. Is there a way to somehow, using carrots and sticks, to have those C-level people appointed and speak, ones who speak the right language? Thanks.
Well, I think that kind of goes to the commissions as well, right?
Yeah.
If the relevant commission doesn't have, I'll call them a champion for cybersecurity, then that doesn't flow down to the staff, and that doesn't become a priority of the commissions themselves. So it's not only the utilities, but also the commissions need that as well.